Let's talk about the Pentagon. I've been waiting. I mean, if there's one thing I've been passionate about for decades is the amount of waste and abuse that's inside the Pentagon. The military-industrial complex needs to be slashed massively. And
$300 for a screw. That's what the American taxpayers are paying for right now. So it's not just about, do we have a strong military, but do we have a wasteful one? Go ahead.
I would pay a lot less for a screw.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that right now.
I see what you did with that.
Is President Trump really about to slash the size and scope of the Pentagon? Are we really about to end foreign wars? During yesterday's cabinet meeting, President Trump leaned over to Defense Secretary Hegesth to push him to make cuts. So will it happen? Pentagon is set to fire up to 5,400 workers. And of course, the mainstream media like Reuters, which makes money, of course, from USAID, says there's a backlash. Yes, from the military-industrial complex, of course. Lieutenant Karen Kiwa, I'm going to get this right. Karen Kiwakowski. Yes, did I name it? I think I got it right. Is a national security expert, a retired U.S. Air Force officer who was openly critical of the U.S. disaster in Iraq. She's a critic of these wars that the U.S. carries out around the world. And is it safe to say, Karen, that you're a progressive? So you also come from that perspective, which we've seen, I think, liberals move in the direction of being sort of warmongers over the past few decades. They've become the party of war. They used to be the party of peace. Is it safe to say that you're maybe a lone voice right now?
I'm really more of a libertarian, and I think we are hearing more libertarian voices and at least libertarian messages when it comes to examining the waste, the fraud, the excess, the unnecessary expenditures that we have for the Pentagon and the empire that has been created. So I'm anti-empire. Does that make me a progressive? Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I guess it used to. Yeah, I know.
We don't know.
It's all the weird melding of these parties because, I mean, liberals back in the day were very much anti-war. They were anti-empire. Yes. They were anti, carrying out regime change operations around the world. And I'm more of a libertarian as well, and I agree in the same way. So it's weird. The liberals have gone so far afield from those tenets. It's kind of strange. So why do you think we're hearing such a big backlash right now? There's a backlash where the liberal media is saying they're so concerned about 5,400 employees about to be fired, and this is really, really terrible.
Yeah, well, obviously anything that they can do to hit back at Donald Trump to make him look like he's making a bad decision. This is part of it, the letting go of employees, civil servants, that kind of thing. But much more of that is coming. It has to happen. And really, it's been pointed out that presidents like Bill Clinton, Obama, other presidents have cut military, have ended programs and put people on the street, so to speak. In fact, I served in the military for 20 years, and I remember at least two reduction in forces that happened in the 80s and 90s. So, this is normal. Cutting military is normal. But what I think Trump is talking about doing, if he does it, is really far more drastic than just, small cuts. He's not nipping around the edges. He's looking at a really massive reduction and transformation of our idea of what the defense needs to be for this country. And I do think, and I don't know if Trump will do this, but I do think it's a great opportunity for those who oppose empire to really bring the troops home, to close unnecessary and warmongering bases and military positions abroad. I mean, we have, I think, 155 countries have some sort of American military presence. That's not needed, okay? That is bad in itself. And then, the whole population in this country, I would say most of them, really don't like fraud. They don't like waste, and they don't like $300 screws. That doesn't make sense to them. And so really it's a popular, fixing what's wrong with the military in a lot of ways can be popular. Now, when you start nipping into the big, Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics and the congressional lobbying activities, when you start cutting their pet projects and the things that enrich them, kickbacks that they get for their campaigns, just all the dirty stuff that goes on, that defense money funds. When we start nipping into that and cutting that, Congress will be the barrier, not the people. People, I think, agree with this. And the people in the military. Now, I've been retired since 2003, but people in the military today, they care about the same things. They don't like fraud, waste, and abuse. They don't like stupidity, and they don't like working in the middle of stupidity. And there's lots and lots of examples we have to deal with. And now's the opportunity to do it.
But when we look at the military, even those who really are supportive of the military, we know that this ballooning budget has not contributed to quality of life for military members. When we started Redacted, we were freaking out that the military budget was in the $700 billion range. Then the next year was $800 billion. This year it's $910 billion, which is 3 times that of China's, which has more military personnel. And so is there a way that we can, in fact, shrink the military budget and do better by military personnel?
Oh, yeah, there's tons of ways. First off, reduce the footprint globally where it doesn't make any sense. And that's most places. It doesn't make sense. We also have, and this we don't talk about very much, but we have literally probably 1,000 different legacy systems. And when I say legacy systems, I don't mean just computer systems, weapons systems that have been around, some of them in World War II era, that still have logistics tails, that still have a production line that can be either turned on or actually is running. These create a small number of jobs around the country, but they are not necessary. Nobody's going to notice when we get rid of them, and they should have been gotten rid of a long time ago. We also have we have a lot too many generals, and you can say, well, what's wrong with that? The generals don't cost us very much, but they do, because generals require commands. They require staffs. They require growing missions. They compete with each other for the validation of their missions, the justification. They become political activists for more spending in their pet part of the Pentagon. So we really have to restructure our organization so that there's the right number of people at the top, and all those resources that are now, providing office space and, useless activities that make generals feel like they are doing something. That money can be pushed down into taking care of people. And I know that you've probably done stories on this and certainly seen them, of the condition of American barracks for our enlisted people that, are not living off base. They're living on base in really conditions that they're just absolutely unhealthy, appalling. And it's an embarrassment that we spend more than any other nation, more than the 12 nations underneath us we spend for military stuff. And we have moldy, flooding, contaminated, crowded, falling apart barracks for our people. That really tells you it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Isn't that always the case, though, Lieutenant Colonel? Because, you have where the massive amounts of money go to the military industrial complex, and the contractors, they're making the millions. They're building the luxury houses around D.C., but it's the rank and file soldiers. It's the fighting force that gets stepped on and gets treated so poorly all the time. They can't. I remember, in Iraq, we couldn't put proper armor on the Humvees.
Oh, yeah.
When IEDs were just blasting through it like aluminum foil. And it finally took years of them to put proper armor on the Humvees, for crying out loud.
Yep. Yeah, well, one of the things Trump talks about, and I know Pete Hegesth talks about this, and we'll see if he follows through. But he talks about putting the war fighter and the people on the line who support that war fighter. He's talking about putting them first, taking care of them. Their conditions, and putting money that we have for personnel to those people. So we'll see. I think it is a priority that he has, and it's an important priority. But really, this whole 50% cut, because Trump has offered this up, can we cut our military 50%? Well, we certainly can. And the first step is to really have a set of priorities about what are we doing with our military. And I've always said for years, and I noticed this even when I was in the military, that because I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, right? Very unprotected that day for some reason. And I realized all of this spending does not defend our country, and it doesn't defend our troops. It doesn't defend anything. It certainly doesn't defend our borders. We know that. But we spend all this money, and almost all of it is offensive. It is to foment problems abroad, maybe create problems that we can then use the military to solve. I'm not sure the logic behind all of it, but we spend a lot of money. It's not on defense. Why don't we just talk about what it takes to defend our country, to defend the people in this country. And that's a starting point. We can probably do it at 25% of what we're currently spending.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look at these other
China
countries
does.
like China, Russia. I mean, look at it as a percentage of GDP, how much they're spending to defend themselves. And we have 900 military bases around the world, hundreds of thousands of forces scattered around the world. I spoke to Dr. Ron Paul this morning. He said something to me. He said back when he couldn't even believe back when he was in Congress, he said he found out that the Coast Guard, they were begging for all sorts of more money and more money and more money. And he found out that the Coast Guard was like operating clipper ships in the Mediterranean. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I thought the Coast Guard was meant to guard our coast. Our coast.
Yeah.
What the hell are they doing in the Mediterranean? Like, this is
And
the kind of
Black Sea.
boondoggle.
The Coast Guard is also in
exactly.
the Black Sea. I mean, that is insane. So that's an easy fix. Pull them back, pull them to port, count your boats,
save some money.
what you need to do, and address it. You know, whether you have to cut or change your mission a little bit, you do that. That's what Americans are supposed to do. That's what our leadership is paid to do.
And defend our southern border. I mean, I know I'm maybe preaching to the choir here, but if we have over 100 years of history in the United States where our soldiers defended our southern border in the United States. And this is not like some new idea. Instead of having forces in Stuttgart, Germany, for crying out loud, could actually be in Arizona. A lot of people in our chat room, I mean, love you. And they're saying, yes, bring our troops home. I mean, I think our audience, we should put up a poll here, but our audience, I think, really agrees. And I think, Trump has been asked repeatedly over the past few weeks, are you going to bring troops out of Europe? What do you think it would take for him to do that?
Well, he's on the right track because he is, he's pushing Europe away, treating him like a vassal. They don't like being treated like a vassal, so they're pushing him away. They're saying, how can we be independent of America? That's great. That's good progress. But if they're independent of us, if Russia and the United States and China are treating each other as peers, not necessarily aggressively, not fearfully, there's no need to have American troops in Europe. They can defend themselves perfectly well. There's just so many opportunities to do. We can even defend Europe. We can do it from here with the technology that we have. We do not need American troops there. And we haven't really for a long time. And actually, that would be quite popular in places like Germany. Now, there's other European countries. We're building these massive bases in Romania and Poland. And they're already built to some extent, but they're not finished, I don't think. I know the Romanian one is not finished. And why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that because we're leaving Germany and we're getting out of some of these other places where they're unhappy with us. But why? Those should be canned as well. But It's a lot to ask, but it is not unreasonable for us to bring troops home and reduce our spending in this area.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? And I'll get you out of here on this, unless Natalie has another question here. But you mentioned briefly, and I cannot let this go by, especially when I see the JFK book above your head there. And you mentioned being in the Pentagon on 9/11 on that day, and you said, we were not very protected on that day, oddly enough. Can you elaborate being in the Pentagon that day and why you felt like there was not a level of protection?
I mean, the day 9/11, started out so for most people, a beautiful day on the East Coast, just like any other day. And then suddenly we have buildings falling down in New York. We have airplanes being hijacked. We have whatever it was in the Pentagon, whatever it was that hit the Pentagon or blew up the Pentagon. And we were in that building, and it's 25,000 military people and civilians working for the Defense Department are in the Pentagon. And we were sitting ducks. We were absolutely sitting ducks. We can talk, that's a whole nother thing on why that was, but certainly spending the amount of money that we spend, 9/11 should have been a wake-up call for a lot more than it was. What 9/11 served as was a reason to fight more wars. That's how the politicians used it. That's what we did as a result of it. But what we should have done was said, this Pentagon defends nothing. It does not defend America, it doesn't defend our borders, doesn't defend our airspace. Not only that, the intelligence aspect of this Pentagon doesn't work because we were surprised. So, that was unless
it was all part of a bigger plan to allow it to be attacked.
Well, certainly. Yes. But we won't really be able to get to all that until we dig through the Pentagon and really shake it up and really shrink it down and really find out what's wrong with it, because there are things wrong with it. And we need to get to the bottom of this, shrink it down. And I think if we really seriously do this, we're going to find out, we're going to get some answers about some things that have happened in the last, let's say, 70 years.
Yeah. And so I guess one question I have is, do you think that the language out of this Pentagon and this White House is indicative of a seriousness to do that?
I do think that they're serious, but I am worried that the people sending this message, Elon Musk, Hegesth, and Trump, are vulnerable.
Okay.
If this doesn't happen in 18 months, 24 months, if we do not dig in, break it up, really reduce drastically, and not just the Pentagon, but we're talking about the Pentagon, it certainly needs it. If we don't do it fast, if we don't do it in a really committed and intense way, we will miss an opportunity that will not come again, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're right. They are vulnerable. And there's deep state people, the permanent Washington, the permanent military industrial complex really doesn't want this to happen. So they're going to fight for their money and they're fighting for their lives right now. So that's great having you on the show. Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kiwakowski. Did I get it right? I hope I get it right.
I say Katowski.
Katowski. Okay, then you took all of the extra consonants out there and you just scrunch them down for me. That helps me out. All right. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Colonel. Great to have you on the show. Really, really great guest here. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.